Welcome to Tonkocast number 31. Today's guests are Carlos Baena and Eve Skylar. Carlos is the director of his new film La Noria, the short animated short film, and Eve is his production designer for that film. And Carlos and I go way back. We worked together at Pixar, and even before Pixar, we had known each other through mutual friends. And I just always loved that sort of independent spirit Carlos had. So when Carlos left Pixar, I wasn't surprised. And he left to work on his own films, and one of which was this amazing short film, La Noria. And I even worked on this film when he first started, did a few paintings. And it was a long journey for him, just like any independent film journey. He finished it finally, and the film is phenomenal, and I hope everybody gets to see it. But before that, check out this interview. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of both of your work. Carlos, you and I worked together at Pixar on Toy Story 3 and a little bit on Monsters University, and then, we go way back with our mutual friends. And so, our friendship goes back quite a long time. And then, but ever since I've known you, you always had this independent spirit. Eve, I've known your work. Myself and Robert always kind of followed your work. And so definitely not a huge surprise, but, we haven't really spent too much time to talk before. So I'm very looking forward to hearing more about your journey and your contribution to this film. But of course, mainly, I love to start with your incredible film, La Noria, going around the festivals right now. And if you don't mind, maybe Carlos, starting with sort of introducing this film, obviously without spoiling. I'm sure there are some audience members that haven't watched the movie, but I definitely would love you to talk about your film first.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having us, guys. We're so thankful that you do this, not only for us, but for all the filmmakers, honestly, because there's not that many people doing like this kind of like independent productions, and you really feel like the help and the reach in trying to push other filmmakers to succeed. I had lunch yesterday with Andrew Coates, and we were talking about that it's like, it's very hard to do these kind of things, and it always looks so different from the outside until you are deep in it. So it's always very appreciated to have, friends in the industry helping you on that journey. And about the film, I don't even know where to start. I think it started out with this feeling of missing that kind of freedom that I had back in college, where I could do or create anything under no restrictions, whether it was something dark, it could be anything really. And I think when you're working on these studios, there's a part of that kind of like gets put aside for a while. I mean, ultimately, you're working on somebody else's vision and creations. And after many years, I think combined between ILM and Pixar, it was a total of maybe 13 years. I think there was that feeling of me, well, what else do I want to say? And other than as being an animator, is there anything that I want to do? And I've been missing, like in general, darker content. I think we talked about this a while back. Like, I would always like watch these horror films ever since, like even growing up. And I was always missing some of that in in animation, but it doesn't have to be horror. Honestly, it could be anything. It could be like science fiction. It could be anything. It's just a different sensibility. So that's kind of like where it all started. I mean, I thought I was signing up for a sprint, but I ended up signing up for the Ironman triathlon. And again, you don't know until you are in it, and you just keep moving forward. So I don't know if you want to chime in on your end. You were the first. Let me talk about how I got to meet Eve.
That's great.
And then if you take it from there, because if it wasn't for Eve, I don't even know if we would be here right now. I don't even know if I would have made a film. Eve was the very first person at the APE convention, I think 2009 or 2010, that I pitched this idea, and I pitched it to her, and I never have met her. And then Eve, you take it away.
Sure. I was vending at a table at APE convention, and at that time I was going through a pretty dark time in my personal life as well as my art. Like the kind of art I was making was a war-torn person that survives through imagination, that kind of stuff. And I got a lot of feedback from the studio saying it was too dark. Nobody wants to make this, right? And so I was there vending, and Carlos passed by, and we just bonded over the kind of dark theme. But there's something beautiful to that darkness. And he told me a story that he was tinkering with at that time. And I think I said something along the lines like, you have to make this. Like, you absolutely must make this. And I'll be the first artist on board if you are going to make it. And that's kind of how it started.
And sure enough, like within, I don't know if it was a week or maybe months. It's been a while, but she passed me like a couple of pieces, saying like, I was thinking about this idea that you've been talking about, and I think her pieces combined with two pieces that Pascal sent me as well. I was like, you know what, like I just gotta go and do this. I think it's just your gut.
Yeah.
That's
I'm curious. I'm curious if you guys remember, that's like 8 years ago, 9 years ago. What do you guys remember how Carlos pitched that to you, Eve? Like that made you feel like, oh my God, you got to make this thing, and I want to work on it.
Yeah, the parts that I really remember is about the journey of a boy who's traveling through darkness. And I think every artist and every person can really relate to that. It's a very universal theme. I think we've all been in a very dark place where it's really difficult to get out. And ultimately, you have to make that journey yourself. So that really spoke to me, especially at that time.
Like when anyone has this kind of a powerful creative inspiration that even though at the time I can imagine, Carlos, you didn't have a lot of things figured out or a lot of things planned out, but then you still kind of inspired Eve enough to want to do artwork, right? That's kind of like the start of this journey.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there was, and we were talking about this, Eve and I, earlier. There was a lot more than just this kid running away from these monsters. I mean, I think there was a take on a nightmare, and there was elements of grief and loss and scars and memories, and I think as you start to work on it, I think that the film starts to have a voice as well, and it starts to tell you kind of like which direction it wants to go. And I think having Eve on the early stages, and then having Sasha Corellis, our producer, on the early stages, I thought it really started like materializing this journey. You just don't think the journey is gonna take half your life, but but I knew that was a journey I needed to do, and I think, in this industry, I'm finding out that if I think too much with my head, I play too safe, and if I'm thinking too much with my heart, I do a lot of stupid stuff. And it always feels to me like my gut always kind of like speaks to both, it's somewhere in the middle. And on this film, I had already money saved from working at Pixar and from Animation Mentor, and it just felt right to take that kind of risk and leave the studio, even having a mortgage. And I would do it all over again. And it hasn't been an easy journey. A couple of times you just want to give up. You're just like, you feel lonely. You feel like you don't have the time. You feel like you don't know what the hell you're doing. But the one thing you do know is I'm not going to stop. So, whichever the outcome is going to be, let's just keep going forward.
It's incredible. I don't know if you remember, but actually, I remember very vividly when you pitched your film to me at in your apartment in Castro. I think it was like a 2012 or something, because it's like a few years before I left Pixar. That means probably a year or two after, you pitched to Eve, and you've been working on it with, a few other guys, friends. Some of our mutual friends have been working on it, and you were kind of editing Story Wheel at the time. And I remember, that's when you started to talk about you left Pixar, and you, did this gig with the Paramount, and, you were in LA back and forth, and you're working on this short. And it was a long journey. And, I gotta say, when you first pitched this short to me at your apartment, I was absolutely inspired by the story and the quality that you were going towards. Like, some of the tests you showed me, and you were going for this kind of realism, which is always hard to do in CG, independent CG, definitely. But also the risk, as you say, that you were taking creatively, financially, career-wise, all that felt pretty bold to me at the time. I was still working at Pixar. It was before we started making The Dam Keeper. And I have to say that your bravery and your gutsiness, and I got to say, a little bit of, at the time, I thought, oh, this guy's crazy. It's a little bit of that. I have to say, helped me jump ship as well. You inspired me, and I'm sure a lot of others who left Pixar to start on their own. You kind of led that sort of indie spirit. Definitely, you were definitely one of the guys. And I definitely wanted to thank you officially, on this pod. But I just wanted to also let you know that that was incredible. I didn't see that, especially seeing the film, the final outcome, this beautiful, beautiful film. I don't know if I could say that I could see the end result back then. You were able to see that with your vision. How did you do that?
Well, it did go through changes and through adjustments. I think when we started, we were looking at we did a period of research where we just looked at what's been done, prior to that. And I looked at the Coraline. There was a film by a stop motion animator named Paul Berry called The Sandman from 1991. And then I look at Rango, and I just look at things that have been done. And like my gut really wanted to try to do something as cinematic as I could. And I think part of it had to do with what I was watching a lot at the time, which is a lot of live action horror. films, and I kind of wanted to try to approximate lighting and color and the look of it in that direction. But we started very on the early stages, everything very saturated, very animated, I guess, And I think slowly over the course of the years, it started like taking a life of its own. You will meet like artists, that they would do a test or an image or a render or anything really, and you would be like, that's it, like just headed towards this direction that we are all going. But I cannot really say it was 100% the day I started in my head visually. I think I have to give a lot of credit to artists, including Eve and our VFX supervisor, Yassine, and a lot of people credit for going on that journey together and going like, wouldn't it be rad if we did this with the lens? Wouldn't it be rad to try doing this? And I even got a bunch of pushback, for example, on the lighters, where the lighters, we would study a lot of film noir. And I think because of their job, because of where they're working at in these studios, there was a tendency to overlead a lot. Or to put a lot of lights and a lot of fill and everywhere, and I think it became like a nice exercise of, well, that's feeling safe. Like, how about we just start taking lights out? And how black can we go on the blacks? So it's been a mix of elements coming together over the course of the years. And like you said, it's definitely a risk. I mean, within a year and a half, maybe 2 years, all my savings were gone because I had this idea of like, you know what, I'm going to try to cover it with my savings. And this, and no pirate licenses. So we cover the licenses. And then you start to do the numbers and you're like, I don't think I could last a year. And sure enough, within a year and a half, 2 years, 150,000, I think, were gone. And I found myself with a film that had already been started, and I didn't know if I could even finish. We asked for budgets to different places, a lot of smaller companies, and the cheapest for a 10-minute short film of this quality that we were asked was 1.2 million. And not having a studio backing, I was like, well, there goes 2-3 years of my life doing this, and I'm not even going to be able to finish it. Luckily, all the people that were involved, not only there was support, but there was a willingness to like, oh, we are going to do this. Like, we are going to finish it. We are like, there's that thing which is like time, quality, and money, and kind of like you can never have all three of them. So money was gone. Quality, we wanted a particular quality, so that kind of like left time. So, instead of like 2 more years, let's make it in 57 years. Let's hope for the best. It hasn't been that long, but I'm one of the biggest rewards has been actually finishing it. Yeah, absolutely. That's yeah.
And I think actually the time became a blessing in disguise. At the end, I feel like over time our tastes evolved, as well as the people that joined. We're very fortunate that they joined at the right time that we needed them. And then when they go back to their industry jobs, we have new people join, and we needed those particular talents at that time. It seemed like the film was really benefiting from the collaborative spirit. And I think that's something that I wanted to point out too, is like collaboration brought so many people from around the world internationally. Like, we probably would have never really met if so they brought in their own specialties with them too.
That's
Yes.
really amazing. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of international collaboration, co-production thing that you guys achieved, I guess, through Atella, right?
Yeah. We needed to have a tool that allow people from a lot of different places. So half the meetings were talking Spanish and half in English. So I think there was a little bit of Spanish being learned by the whole group, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, the whole Artella, it became a necessity to try to even make a film like this. I mean, I met with Bobby and Sean really, really long time when I was telling them, maybe it was around the time I had spoken to Eve, and I was starting to tell them my plans of like, I'm going to try to do this. And we had already been talking about if animation can be taught online, what's stopping productions to be happening online? And I think a big roadblock of that was always the file management. Who is sharing which files and what is the internet and how is certain areas of the process gonna work out? And that those questions kind of like excited us to figure them out. And a lot of it was very technical. And what I found was I was excited about the technical at first, and quickly that excitement disappeared in no time because like 3 out of 5 meetings weren't creative on the early stages. It was a lot of talking about containers, pipeline, caches, file referencing this and that half the time I didn't even understand. I mean, I think I you sign up because you get excited about storytelling and characters and cinematography and composition and acting and then the first 2-3 years there was a lot of technical and but it slowly, like I said, I think it starts to get its way, and then you start to see things working, and then you start to see artwork from artists, and that excitement it becomes motivation and a lot of fuel to keep moving forward. And I mean, there was a time where nothing was rendering, and I remember a conversation that I had with my partner Sasha, where I told her, like, we spent 3 years working on this and we cannot even render a single frame. So how can we expect to render 155 shots? And I remember like going to bed feeling like, just really down. And I remember because I was in Spain, she was in the United States at that time. And I think, honestly, I think the collaboration motivates you to keep going. I think working with people that believe in it just as much as you do really gives you that fuel.
I think that's great, Carlos. And, I want to talk a little bit about the creative side and how you came up with the story. And, obviously this is somewhat unconventional animated horror film. And can you talk a little bit about the choice of this story and storytelling? I mean, you didn't back off in terms of how scary it could be. I got scared watching that film, and very effectively. I love to hear about the creative choices you guys made, and you didn't really shy away visually and story-wise, pushing that sort of you're on a toe and just kind of waiting to be scared. Is that from the get-go that's what you wanted?
Yeah. Well, one thing I knew I wanted wasn't just horror for the sake of horror.
Right.
I wanted horror that was balanced by something else. You see some movies like The Evil Dead where the horror is balanced with the comedy, and then some of my favorite horror films is actually balanced by emotion. And I definitely wanted those two elements. and from that, this idea where the horror is internal. And it did start out with a simple idea. And I think which is like, yeah, we're going to do something darker, blah, blah. But when it comes to horror, I like more the quiet horror instead of the constant jump scares. And here it felt more exciting to have moments where something is behind the kid, but you don't put the giant sound effect that is like like blowing your ears, and instead you just let the audience just kind of like feel uneasy about these weird events happening. So that we knew early on that we wanted to go towards that kind of horror. When I look at it now, I don't know to what degree we went very, very scary or not. I mean, it gets to the point where you look at a film a million times and you don't even know what the hell you have anymore. And so, yeah, so some of the horror elements are definitely there. There's a couple of cliches for sure, where I just needed to get it off my system. So yeah, I don't know if you want to chime in on that part.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think when I look at the color script evolution, like that tells me a lot. We went from having more animated, saturated colors that are kind of more traditional in animation. And then we kept pushing it darker and darker, more desaturated, more towards live action. I think both of us really love a lot of the old movies like Spirit of the Beehive. Pan's Labyrinth was a big inspiration for us as well. Tale of Two Sisters, The Others. Like we were looking for an animated film that can really push the boundaries in terms of the camera, the lighting, and the emotional storytelling, so that the horror is just a genre. It's just a medium to tell this kind of deeper story.
Yeah, it even expanded to the music and the sound. I ended up reaching to this sound designer that have been doing a lot of horror. And he worked on this film called The Orphanage, and this other film called Rec from Spain, both of them. And I knew that I wanted that kind of sensibility. But even with the music, one of the references that we looked at a lot, even for color desaturation and neutralness, was the film from 2008, Let the Right One In. It was a Swedish film. Yep. And I found myself not only studying the film, but even incorporating so much of the soundtrack on the temp tracks, on the temp edit, to the point that at one point it was, it really hit this balance between emotion and darkness, to the point where I reached out to the composer, and I got turned out twice by the manager, like basically saying, he doesn't do short films. And I'm the manager, I'm not gonna get commission, so no, forget it, kid. get out. And I remember not wanting a no from somebody else other than the composer. So I ended up putting together a PDF directly for the composer with a letter telling him why it cannot be any other composer. His name is Johan, and I told the manager, just give this to him, and then if he says no, then I'll just disappear from the rest of your lives, And 2 days later, I didn't hear from the manager, but I did hear from Johan directly, and he wrote he wanted to work on it, which was, there was a few of those milestones throughout where you're like, am I being so stubborn that, they're just gonna, run away, and then it works, So I think it's been the mix of having the right people and the sound and music also that help that kind of like horror feeling that we were going after. Because too much horror, I feel like I get bored when it's just dark, I just love the balance and the variety of it.
I think one thing that was most impressive to me, which I did not know because the last reel that I saw was such a long time ago, and I was fortunate to be able to work for like a few days in just super short amount. But at the time, I did the part where just a little bit of a beginning and a little bit of ending scenes, and but what I didn't anticipate until I watched, or before I watched the final film, was the impact of this emotional payoff of this entire story. That even though you guys did a fantastic job as a film that kind of takes you to this dark place in a very, very effective way, the payoff was so emotionally amazing, and I was so satisfied watching that film, and I think that's really difficult to do. And first, it's incredibly amazing. That congratulations on that. I was so blown away, and I told you that right away after I watched that. But can you talk a little bit about how you guys, both of you actually, from the story standpoint as well as the visual standpoint, how you guys were able to pull off, without giving away your story, this emotion of this boy's journey in such an effective way? Thank you,
guys. Coming from you, this is awesome. It's great to hear, man. If you wanna jump on that one, I didn't wanna talk.
It's such a heavy question.
Well, yeah,
it's such a it's a lot to. It's hard to describe. It's like, I don't know. Maybe it's part gut feeling, but it's also part of. I think when you've been in that dark space and you know how the boy feels, you really want him to make it out, I guess. And you're kind of pulling from your own personal experience, but certainly like some of the creative choices really helps to convey that. Like we played with space a lot and shape language without going too much into it, but every prop and every set is made with love and has a lot of symbolism too. And it helps to convey that emotional journey as the boy moves from one room to another. And especially in the hallway and the second floor, like we expanded that space to help have that vertigo feeling, similar to like Rosemary's Baby, where the furniture kind of moves to the point where you feel uneasy. And so the camera, the lighting, the set helps with that journey too.
Yeah, we also play with the editing too. There's some of these shapes that if it's talking about, we even apply them to the camera, even, like things like the spirals and stuff like that. We even design some moves that way. And on the editing, there's this thing that I was trying to do with the editing, which is like this lead up to an explosion type of feeling. And I was, as I was working on the edit, all the way back from the storyboards, I knew that it was an increasing tempo to an explosion, and then a prologue or a relaxation, I guess, from that explosion into this other part in the attic. Like if I was saying, a lot of we made this house and we made it big for for things like emptiness and stuff like that. And one other thing too, that we always talked about was we were fighting constantly the perfections that the computer gives you. So imperfections were all over the place, from the modeling to the shading, to the walls, to the character, even like tiny, subtle, like little scratches. Like I think that the whole idea was that adding to a vulnerability of a kid, and every single thing that can help to that vulnerability, like we try to explore that. So maybe it was like a mix of things, combined.
I think another word for it too is like authenticity. Like we're really trying to capture, for example, I remember one of the first props that Carlos brought. It was a music carousel. I believe it was from the market in Spain, and it had all these nicks in it. The paint was chipping off a little bit, and there's something so vulnerable and very true and authentic about the way that texture is on that piece of wood. And we try to bring that kind of feeling into the film, like the feeling that the house is lived in, and it's been maybe several generations of the Boyd's family being there, and bringing the authentic feeling too of having a lived-in feeling.
Yeah, there was a few moments, I mean, the whole thing is, there's like bits and pieces that you try to put into these films. I don't know if you guys went through something similar on The Dark Keeper, but there's at least two separate moments on this film where I found myself at some point in my life in a place of confusion, or in a place of just breaking down and hitting rock bottom, and that feeling of like, I don't know what's in front of me, but I know that I'll have to face it eventually. And I was always carrying that with me, even when there were times where I would even give a reference to an animator where I would act it out, thinking about those things. And then I would just give him the video. I would just tell him, don't show this video to anybody. It's embarrassing as well. But it's really coming from different places throughout your life. And then other things are just things that were put in there in surf of the story and the structure and the character and the acting and all that stuff.
That's really incredible. I don't want to hold you guys up too much. It's a really great talk, but I also want to talk a little bit. I want to ask about you guys, as well as what's next for the film. So I just want to mention that the film is qualified for the Oscar run, and it's being considered right now, and that's really great achievement. I know despite the result, you guys achieved such a tremendous kind of product, film artwork, and I'm sure that will take you guys to the next level of your career, next phase of your careers. And I want to know, both as a filmmaker of this film, as well as you guys individually, what's next for you guys?
I think for me, I'm continuing to develop my voice as an artist and art director. I feel like that's just a lifelong process for me. And through this film, I've learned so much, and just kind of tried to soak up everything from everyone that collaborated with us. And it showed me how little I knew. It's almost like I barely scratched the surface of what filmmaking is about. And so I feel like that's my next step, is just continuing on this journey to try to grab a hold of this this kind of beast, I guess, my own demon.
Yeah, for me, honestly, one thing that really gets me excited, and I don't know if or when, more like when. I think the if is not so much of a question. When I'll be able to work again with a lot of the people that I have been on this journey. Because not only they shown me this collaborative attitude, but they've made it such a fun journey, even on the downs, that I want to keep working with them again. And I think, for example, our character designer, Dave Gaztelumendi, he saved us when we didn't have this, some of these characters figured out design-wise. And throughout finding it, we developed this friendship, just like with Eve. And then through this friendship, then I ended up working with both Day and Eve at Paramount. And then I brought Day also to Anki, he's at Anki right now. And I'm really, I would love to continue, this journey with people in terms of like what is the next steps. Probably nothing with La Noria other than the festivals and just sharing it with the world and with the Indiegogo people that help us. But based on La Noria, I know that there's a place for these kind of different films to exist. And right now, that's kind of like where I'm at, just talking to a lot of different people to see if that's even a possibility. There's some things that are being done right now that are very exciting in other studios that are not public or announced. That really makes me happy about the direction of the industry, especially with the streaming and things like that. And so yeah, I think I'm hoping that it's just a matter of time. I'm just super happy that I jump out of the safety of the boat. And I'm glad I didn't drown. It did help, it's interesting because I was here actually working on doing fixes for renders. And when you are like a small independent production, you have to do a bit of everything, really.
Yeah.
And I was putting on the background the Tonko House podcast that you guys did with Andrew and Lou on Borrow Time.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think around that time I'm tired and I don't have much energy left, and you don't even see the light at the end of the tunnel anymore. There's like no light. It's like nighttime, that tunnel. And I remember listening to that and just getting a boost in terms of, and trying to like listen a lot of different things to motivate yourself to keep going. Because if there's something we found on this film, which is something that also happens within the film itself, is that there's going to be falls and there's going to be like hardships, and you take it like day by day, and even if you don't see the end of the line. So one thing that this film taught me was to approach it more on so what are we going to work on next week, instead of like, when am I going to finish this shit, because many times when you are looking at the end of the line, like it gets very overwhelming very fast. But looking at it like day by day, like a marathon, like the next bottle of water, it made it that much more doable for at least for me.
That's really amazing. Again, guys, congratulations. I'm very excited about what's going to happen to not only the film, but both of you. I was so looking forward to see where you guys are going to go. And possibly I dream of the time that I can collaborate with you guys again, in small way or big way, it doesn't matter. Again, like you said, the industries, we believe too that it's going the right direction, exciting direction, and more in the spirit, I think will be rewarded, I think in this current of this new direction. So Thank you so much for giving us the time on Tonkocast, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Dice. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.